Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Jay Singh, and I'm the founder of Publication Academy, your online training partner for higher ed career advancement and professional development. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today for this installment of our Career Pathways series, Exiting Academia. Today, we have a fascinating interview with Dr. Gustavo Quintero, who successfully transitioned from completing a PhD in Romance languages and comparative literature into the exciting industry vertical of hospitality. So let's get right into it. Over now to our amazing Publication Academy interviewer, Dr. G. Nantra.
Hello everyone, Dr. G. Nantra here, and today I'm excited to interview Dr. Gustavo Quintero. Welcome, Dr. Quintero.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here, G. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk to you as well. So let's start with your educational background. Describe that for us.
Yes. So I graduated from philosophy and literature, my BA in Colombia. And then one of my professors here was like, "Oh, you're kind of smart. Why don't you do a PhD in the US?" And I was like, "Sure." I applied to different universities, and the next thing I found myself in is moving to the U.S., upstate New York, for a PhD in comparative literature and Romance languages in Cornell University.
Mm-hmm.
I stayed there. I completed my PhD after 6 years, and then I went to work for 4 years. So for 4 years, and then that's when I realized academia wasn't going to go any further, and I decided to go back to school and do an MBA, a dual degree actually, an MBA and a master's in business analytics.
Mm-hmm.
And after 2 years, I'm here. Recently graduated.
Right. So what do you do now? What did you transition into when you decided academia was not for you?
So when I decided that academia wasn't for me, I decided to go for an MBA. And during the MBA, I fell in love with data analytics. And right now, I am working as a contractor for a hospitality company, basically a very similar company than Airbnb. It's called Casa. And what I do is just create predictive models. That is, based on statistics, how, even from a database, trying to predict how much occupancy will I get on a given date for a given market. Right.
Wow.
So it's a matter of predicting what's going to happen with certain hotels and houses.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. You went from Romance languages and comparative literature to data analytics. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But what I really want to talk about is, how did you find this contract position? For a lot of people who are in academia and they want to, go outside of academia, sometimes there is that job that serves as maybe like yours, like a contract job that they do to prove themselves, to show that they have experience. And sometimes I recommend that to people. So let's talk about how you found this position.
A little bit of detour here. I think you're pointing out to the crucial aspect of the transition. Because for us academics or former academics, it's about, the rules are very clear. Right? The rules are very clear. You publish, you do X, Y, Z to get a job, a tenure track job or a visiting assistant or whatever. You do know the rules of the game, right? And then you publish a certain amount of stuff, or you fulfill the requirements and you go to the next level, or your, your assistant professorship ends. We do know what's happening. When it comes to transitioning, it gets very blurry very quickly. Yep. And it's very disorienting for us, right? Yeah. And I count myself in those still. It is, okay, you need to go to LinkedIn. You need to just establish a bunch of networks and then just apply, but maybe not apply through the LinkedIn. And then it's just, right? So it's just like, a network, because network is the way you go, but you need to do it in a certain way. But we don't have the preparation for that.
Yes.
Right? And it is very daunting. It is extremely daunting to be like, what do I need to do? Someone tell me what do I need to do, right? So I am in the gist of it, because I'm like still applying for different like more stable positions. But this contract position has been very useful, and I got it because of networking. I reached out to different professors when I was just like not getting any interviews. I reached out to different professors.
Yeah.
They introduced me to other people who had worked with UC Davis before, because of my MBA, my MSBA are from UC Davis, and that's how I got to meet them. That's how I got to meet like the person who offered me this contract position at CASA. It's called the company.
Yeah.
So yes, it was mainly through networking, but it has been very useful. It has been very useful for me to develop the skills and put them in practice.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question, by the
That
way.
answers the question, and just going back to what you said, yes, in academia, we have a structure, right? You publish, you go from assistant professor to associate to full professor. There's a hierarchy. There's a client. I think in the corporate world there is a ladder as well, but like you rightly said, it's not as straightforward, right? So coming from academia, it can be like you use the right word. You said disorienting. I think so too.
It is disorienting, right? Because it's like, sorry to cut you off, but it's like it is this idea of like, we know what we're going for because it's academia, right? It's so established. We have like second year of PhD, fourth year of PhD, whatever. And then you just like go to the job market. You know exactly what you're asked for.
Yeah.
And then you go there and it's like, what kind of positions are there? What am I useful for?
Yes.
Right? And then like some positions have different names for different roles. So it's like, okay, this is a moving target. Oh my God. So that's one of the main challenges, especially when you just come out to find your first corporate job. It is, this is a room full of mirrors. Well, what is happening? Right.
Yes.
So yeah, it is disorienting.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that and
Of
for
course.
also like highlighting the fact that it was networking, right? I always share that, job application or the job search process is really a toolbox of methods. It's not just one thing, right? You could be applying, like I was just chatting with somebody, he had been applying for jobs, and yet it was a recruiter finding him on LinkedIn that finally helped him find a job. For some people I've chatted with, it's networking. For some people I've chatted with, it's like going back to their alumni network, right? And so really just like looking in that toolbox and seeing which one is going to serve me well is going to be so helpful. What made you, I think you said academia wasn't for you. What made you say that?
Hold on, give me 1 second.
No problem. It's not.
Yeah, it's because like I'm on holidays here and like my parents are just coming, so
That was beautiful. It's all right. Go ahead.
okay. So yeah, sorry. Repeat the question, please.
Yes, I was saying that you said academia wasn't quite for you.
Yes, that is
So,
correct.
right. Why did you well, how did you come to that conclusion?
It was a painful process, actually. It
Yeah.
was a painful process because, ever since I was in my undergrad, I really wanted to be a professor and I really wanted to study literature and cinema. It was the thing that I did, right? So the process was just realizing that one, it's a very lonely labor. At least in the humanities, it is extremely lonely because it's you and your project. And you get to meet colleagues, you get to meet other people, but it's not like a collaborative atmosphere where you go and like someone is just like exploring something very similar to you. It's just like you're in such a niche research that maybe you have like points of contact with other people, but it's you and your project, right? That's one. The other thing is this, sorry for the jargon, but this hyper identification with your project. You are your project. If it's successful, you are successful. If it fails, you are a failure, right?
Wow.
So there is no distance between your personal life, your conception as an individual, and from the project that you're having.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very innate thing from academia, right? It's you are your project, you are the successful your project or not, and that's something that threw me off because I was like, I had a girlfriend a long time ago, and I was doing the research for my dissertation,
Yeah.
and I was working all the time. Right, as academics, we don't have that boundary. And she was like, "Why do you have to work so much?" Right? It's like, why do you have to work on Sundays afternoon? Why do you have to work on Saturday morning?
Yeah.
And that struck a chord because for me it was like, yeah, you don't get it because you're not an academic. But then I was like, this is not normal.
But she had a
This
point. Yeah.
it's not. She got a great point, right? It's like this is not normal. Like this lack of boundaries that academia encourages us to just embrace is not normal, right? Weekends, at least one of them, like Saturday or Sunday, should be for like having your personal life,
Yeah.
right? You should have a 9 to 5, not a 9 to like whatever.
9 to never.
9 to never, and that's something that it was very striking for me because I was like, when am I done with the job?
Yeah.
And that is something that I was like, and it's also very ungrateful because, hey, your impact is very minimal.
Yeah.
You're the only one who's like very devoted to your research because nobody else understands your research. You're so specialized that nobody else understands it. And number three, what was for me like the thing that I was like, I cannot keep doing this any longer was the lack of a stable position. For me, the tenure track job was, the big great whale that it was completely elusive. And for me, it was like, I am getting position, like 2-year position in Brown, then Harvard. Then I had to move all the way to the Pacific Northwest. Then I had the possibility to go back and be in North Carolina. And I was like, when am I going to leave? When am I going to have my own personal life? Because it's like 1 or 2 year position and my life is on hold.
Yeah.
So that's something that I was like, I just can't have this any longer. This is not sustainable in the long run.
Yeah.
So that's why I decided to just leave academia, leave this like dream behind, because it was just a dream that I had in my 20s, and in my 30s, it was no longer sustainable to have a life when you have other concurrent priorities. That's why I decided to live.
Yeah, you bring up so many good points, and I think that your last point, though, on what you think you wanted in your 20s and then getting, or what you thought you wanted in the future and then getting to the future and realizing that I'm a different person than I was 30 years ago, is such an important it's such an important distinction to make, because a lot of people get stuck in that, right? Like, oh, this is who I've always been. And because of that, they stay in something that maybe doesn't serve them well. Maybe they are not like their very best at it. Not in terms of brilliance, but they're brilliant, but it doesn't bring the best out in them, right? And they stay there. And so one of the things I'm always challenging people to ask themselves is, I'm not the same. Like, I'm in my early 40s and I'm not the person I was when I was 18 years old choosing that career path. And so it's okay to embrace the fact that, it's a change, it's a different season. What would you say was the hardest part of making the transition?
Giving up on something you struggled so much to get, right? Like, so you mentioned it very well. It's like, it's something like you have invested so much work in. And then it's like, wait, so this didn't bear any quote unquote tangible fruit that I wanted? What's going to happen, right? That part is it's a grieving process. That part is a grieving process of like, I did what my project based on the given information that I had, and that I wanted to pursue it, and my priorities change. That is something that someone told me a beautiful sentence a long time ago. It's like, ideals also go through the process of maturity, right? And I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to have an impact. And then it was like, I am not having an impact. And it's also important to think about that and to confront that. One of the best things I discovered during my MBA is the idea of sunk costs, right? Just because you have invested a bunch of money on a car that is just still not working doesn't mean you need to still invest in a bunch of money in that car that still will not work. Right?
Yes.
And those are sunk costs. That money, you will not get that money back.
Yeah.
Right? And that is something that it takes a toll. And it's painful, but you need to come to terms with it however you want, and bring you stuff that bring you life, right? Because it's tough. It is a sunk cost. For me, that research on revolutionary cinema in Latin America is great. I am very proud of that. And I did a lot of research about it. But I understand that it's not going to give me the tenure track job that I ever dreamt of, right? And it's okay. I came to terms with it, and I'm very happy doing this other crazy thing that I never imagined I would do, data analytics, right? But it's a process. It's a grieving process. I hope that answered your question of like the hardest part.
That answered it very well. Because I hear it over and over again. It's about identity, right? Your identity was very tied to that thing, very tied to that job path. But like you mentioned with the sunk cost fallacy, continuing a path just because you've invested a lot of time and money, especially a path where in your case wasn't giving you a permanent job. It was, your boundaries are blurred, it's exhausting, and you don't see a path forward. I think it was, it was the right decision. And I think time will prove you right that, oh, this was the right decision. I remember when I was making this transition maybe 4 or 5 years ago, a part of me grieved a little bit. And I remember one of my friends was like, oh, both of us work outside of academia. And he was like, so nobody's ever going to call us professor. And I'm like,
But you see, that's the part. It's like this disappointing aspect of it that is like, well, I really wanted to be called professors,
right? Like, professor is such a, at least for this friend of mine, being called professor was like up here. And even though what he was doing was still great, and he was probably getting paid way more than he was getting paid as an academic, he was just like, but nobody's going to call me professor.
because we are attached, again, another terminology, academic terminology. Our affective attachments are not towards money necessarily. We are attached, and we want to be called professors. I want to be called, Professor Gustavo. Right now, for me, it was like, oh my God, he published his book, and I was like, oh my God, look at me, right? That's the attachment that we have. And you said something very well, something like very accurate. Is like this identity, this attachment is that what defines my identity. I remember during the job market, one of the many job market seasons that I went to, people were getting jobs. Some of my friends, or some of the people that I really didn't like, and I was like, how dare they? They were getting jobs. Right. And I was just like thinking about it in terms of, why am I not getting a job? It's such a failure. And I remember a friend she's in a very different field, not academic at all. And she was like, dude, it's a job. You're not a failure. But it's this like identification. My project needs to lead me to a different, to a job, to an academic job. Otherwise, I, as Gustavo Quintero, as a fully personal individual, I'm a failure, right? It's just like a strange thing that we need to distance ourselves
I
from.
identify with it so strongly. I went exactly through the same thing, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I just want to move on to talk about skills, right? Like, but before we even got on here, I was talking about you have a background in comparative literature and Romance languages, and then you move over to data analysis. But it also makes sense because you did an MBA. So
Hmm.
what skills, I mean, even going from that to an MBA, right? Let's talk about that. What skills have you been able to transfer between these degrees into your job at CASA right now?
So there is a couple of skills that I can. Okay, so let me just back up. What is academia? The principle. You get a bunch of information. You synthesize it with the different tools that you have,
Yeah.
and then you articulate it to a different audience,
Mhm.
right? To contribute to knowledge, to contribute to like research, etc., etc. But it's like there's three main stages, three main phases. What is data analytics? You get a bunch of information, you working with different tools, and you present it to other people to
Yeah.
have an impact, right? So the main structure made clicked. I was like, I don't have the tools. Like I have the structure, but I don't have the, statistical tools to develop a model, right? But I do know the overarch, the arc, right? That is something that is key for me. And that was one of the main transferable skills. And I was like, okay, I do know how to do this. I might not have the tools, like the proper, tools to cut the meat, but the idea is there. That was one of the transferable skills. The second one is know how to transmit information to people. It sounds super basic for us as academic, but it's a skill that we do have, and we need to quote unquote denaturalize it. I was like, of course, everyone has that. No, we struggle very hard to do that and to develop that skill, and we need to recognize it to ourselves. The fact that we're able to articulate ideas, the fact that we're able to speak in public and talk to an audience, it's something that we have. And that is something that it was incredibly valuable in my MBA and during my master's in business analytics. People were like, oh my God, you have a tongue of gold. And I was like, I don't know. I was just doing what I did. I was just teaching.
Yes.
So that is key. And the last thing is our project management skills. Obviously, we don't have like the certification of like I always forget the certifications, but like we,
Something like that.
yeah, I don't. It always gives me EMP certification, all of those. But we do have crazy project management skills because we went through a PhD that is just, it's on you. It's your independent work, right? So those are transferable skills that need to be emphasized. And one thing is like, Ashley Ruba, the person that is just doing a bunch of like a favor to all of us, she had in a tweet, like a PhD is not a proof of intelligence, is a proof of stubbornness. And that is absolutely true. We do have the grit. And that is something that at CASA is extremely valuable. We do have the grit to just keep working at it. We don't understand the problem. Give me a little bit more time for me to wrap my head around it. I will not give up, right? And that is something that is key for us. Those are the skills.
So helpful, so helpful. So project management, teaching, and also just being able to synthesize ideas. I love how you laid out each of those skills. Thank you so much. So this has been a great conversation. We're slowly coming to the end of it. For somebody who is where you were, a few years, maybe just about a year ago or so, who is now looking for work outside of academia. They're an academic, maybe they're going through that same grieving process and whatnot, and they're looking for jobs. What advice would you give them?
Be generous with yourself. You're back to square one. It's uncomfortable. So be generous, be patient with yourself. You will land a job eventually.
Yeah.
Just be patient because it's you're acquiring new skills and you're acquiring a new way of life.
Mhm.
So be patient. Don't be mean to you. You made a good decision.
Don't be mean to you. That's a good one. Don't be mean. You see, and it's good that you said don't be mean to you, because a lot of us, we don't intentionally go out of our way to be mean to other people, right?
Mhm.
But we just easily are mean to ourselves.
Exactly. And that's how somehow in a very perverse way has worked, right? We made it through a PhD being like, yeah, of course, I needed to just tell myself how lazy I was and go for it, right? And somehow it just made us through the PhD and somehow made us into academics. But these are the rules of the game have changed.
Yeah.
You don't have the tools yet,
Mhm.
right? In anxiety is not going to help you acquire those skills.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to don't be mean. Don't be mean to yourself and don't be mean to you,
Yeah.
because it's going to help you grow.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Quintero. This has been
Of
such a great
course.
conversation.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me here.